do the people who claim to care about college women's sports, do they care about like college athletes being exploited, not being paid for their work, while the colleges make millions of dollars off of the broadcasting?
Whataboutism again.
Thousands of people every year. No, of course not. It's the trans athlete thing, and we get this one big story every 6 months.
Can we go to that Connecticut track? So one of the trans girls actually did win first place in the 102 meter dashes.
In the initial, one of them? Are we thinking of the same one?
Yeah, I don't want to say her name just because I don't want people to bully this person. I don't want people to go after the individual athlete. To me,
what a transphobe. She won't even say the name so people won't bully her. God, what a bad faith homophobe transphobe. Jeez.
This is more about the larger trend of what we see happening, right?
Well, in terms of, there were two. Okay, we might be talking about different ones.
There's so many of them that they're talking about different ones.
Require more data points. Again, like the harm we're talking about here is like maybe a couple of cis women have placed that this is winning. I'm sorry. The idea that you can justify national.
This is very interesting. This is the first part in our 45-minute conversation. Okay, and I'm going to go back a little bit, where Deborah starts pushing back on something. And, she has a very mild temperament and tone of voice. And just her pushing back on anything, and Vaush immediately becomes agitated. If you want, look at total demeanor and tone of voice changes just by her pushing back and pointing out the fact that he's not addressing the question.
Yeah, she should have done this from the get-go. Her opening question should have been, Vaush, define woman for me. Seriously. I'm telling you, we should have just moved to the 45-minute mark, because the rest of this debate is insane.
The opening question should have been, how are you defining, how are you saying that gender is a social construct? And then he gives his bullshit answer. And then you say, wait a minute, how are you defining woman? And then he gives his completely contradictory answer. And then you say, what the fuck? You just completely contradicted your first answer.
Yeah, exactly.
But I just want everyone to notice how like his tone of voice just changes completely. Just because she's like pushing back even slightly.
He's so bent out of shape.
Yes.
But then he goes completely bad faith because of it. Watch.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
I mean, a trend on a national scale would just require more data points. Again, like the harm we're talking about here is like maybe a couple of cis women have placed that this is
winning.
I'm sorry. The idea that you can justify national outrage based on a handful of cisgender women in college placing lower than they might have otherwise is insane to me. Every other problem imaginable is more worth national consideration. If this was just being discussed in academia or like sports science or whatever, I think that's fair game.
It's so insane because make this same argument with police brutality. Just do it. Do it, Vaush. Do it. Make the same argument. The thing that you're so outraged over just a couple of people getting beat up. It's so ridiculous.
But what he's saying is insane, because he just said, well, if this is a conversation happening in sports academia, then fine, they can have it. Okay. It's like, okay, well, my response to that is, well, guess what, Vaush? We're a couple of dipshits on the internet. Well, I guess Deborah so isn't. She's a fucking, a sex researcher. So it is kind of entirely relevant to her fucking field of study, Vaush. So actually, no, it does make sense for her to talk about this with you. Deborah So is not the Republican Party. She's not the Democratic Party. She's not indicative of any larger movement. She is just an individual talking about something relevant to her fucking field. So answer the fucking question and stop dodging it.
Yeah, and not only that, this all took place because she went on the Joe Rogan podcast to talk about relevant research in her own field. This is actually leave it to academia. And some dipshit on the internet decided that they were going to fucking target her with transphobia and call her out to 300,000 people in their own audience.
That's a great point.
Yeah. What the fuck? Who made this a culture war issue? Who's the one attacking academia? for making this. They get into it more too. Here, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really interesting subject, and there is, reason for concern there. But this, like people act like this is some kind of defining issue. Like the phrase there, "This will unite the parties." Why? If infrastructure couldn't, I mean, our bridges are crumbling. If healthcare couldn't, tens of thousands die. If the fentanyl
But I would argue,
epidemic.
I don't want to cut you off, but I would argue that this is just the beginning of some larger. This is a huge problem because it's going to be the end of women's sports. And I also see look at what's happening in prisons. Look at what's happening in terms of where people are being housed in, say, hospitals, and women are now vulnerable to sexual assault as a result of this because people are self-identifying as
Where's
women.
the evidence of that happening?
Of the hospital in the UK, there was a case of a woman who was on a women's ward, and she reported a rape, and they said, "Oh, that didn't happen because there are only women on this ward." And then they went back and they actually found through security footage that there was actually a trans woman staying on the ward during that time, and so this woman had indeed been allegedly raped. And so I'm not saying that trans women are predators. Well, but this is something.
Where's your evidence for that? Well, actually, it happened here. But it's just a single case.
Yeah, it's got to be at least 20 rapes before Vaush even gets out of bed.
Listen, yeah, until we have a 10-year double-blind study on rape on this specific topic in this specific area, I don't believe you. And this isn't an important topic whatsoever. Okay.
Tell that to the woman that was raped, Vaush.
Yeah.
Something that we're seeing is much more is going to be much more common.
Well, with respect, absolutely not.
Not of trans women, but of men abusing the ability to identify as women.
This is fear mongering, and this is one of the issues that I take with you. You talk about science. I ask you, where's the evidence? You give me an anecdote.
What a fucking piece of shit. Okay, this motherfucker. This scumbag, this Vaush Limbaugh, has been doing nothing but contradicting himself, gaslighting, changing the subject, using a bunch of sophistry and debate tactics. And he asks her for an example or for quote unquote evidence. She gives him an example, and he's like, "This is why I have a problem with you. Okay, you're a bad doctor. You're a bad scientist. You just gave me an example. You didn't give me evidence." Well, right. Of course. There's not going to be a 20-year fucking double-blind study on this subject, Vaush, because it's just happening. It's new. It's something that's happening right fucking now. Obviously, there's not going to be any long-term studies on it, you moron.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Keep this in mind, too. It becomes very interesting a little later on when she asks him for evidence. And he gives his evidence.
Yes.
Very telling.
Where's the evidence of this?
What was the anecdote, though? This was reported in the news. This was reported in the news.
Rapes happen everywhere. One instance is not an evidence of a pattern. And by the way, England, up until recently, had a very prejudiced law where rape could only happen through penetration. Nothing else was counted rape, so if you're a man, you rape a woman, that can be counted.
Going crazy on the whataboutism train here. Jesus Christ.
Whataboutism.
I know. I got the counter out just because it's off the charts now.
What's that have to do with it? This has nothing to do with anything.
Rape cis women.
And also, I am pretty sure, because I remember I looked into this a while ago. I don't remember exactly, but it's like, the whole woman couldn't rape. It was like, it was like called like sexual assault in the third degree or something. Like there was some category, women could still be, found guilty of sexual assault. Okay.
In England, and it wasn't counted as rape because none of the available equipment was present. The idea that I believe
I don't want to interrupt you, but I see we're coming so close on time. And there's so many things for us to talk about. So I just say that I think. Say with prisons especially, this is happening. It happened in England, it's happening in Scotland, it's happening in California.
I'll tell you this much: we don't have evidence that letting trans women into cis women's prisons will increase sexual assault. To my knowledge, there's no evidence of that upticking in an actual, like, here's a percentage, then here's a change percentage sense. We do know that trans women who go to men's prison are like 9 times as likely to be raped. So purely from a harm reduction perspective, and this goes the same with the bathrooms and the hospitals and what have you, putting trans women in the same spaces as men is demonstrably dangerous, whereas putting them in the same spaces as women is circumstantially dangerous so far, only looking at given accounts or once.
Okay, so pay attention here, because he just laid out the argument that men are more dangerous than women. We all heard it, right? Clearly, that's the argument that he's making.
Yes.
The men's space is much more dangerous than the women's space.
Right.
Okay.
Specific bit or another.
But does that not matter that women's safety is being placed at risk as a result of that?
By putting trans women in men's prisons, I
and
agree
why
completely.
why is it but there's socially it's so unacceptable for women to speak up about this. If they say anything in favor of their own safety, they're deemed transphobic.
But there's literally no evidence at present of it compromising their safety, and there is evidence of it severely compromising the safety of the trans woman, who also deserve to not be raped.
How can you say there's no evidence when there are women saying that this is happening to them? We see this happening in prisons.
I'm sorry, are you a doctor? Wait, are you a doctor? That's
I'm
not
not
how
a medical
you form
doctor. I'm not a medical doctor, but I can do statistics.
No. That's not statistics. Evidence of news cases. I can find news cases of anything happening anywhere.
Okay, there was a study in the UK of unisex.
I'm familiar. Oh,
yeah,
sorry, please.
Of unisex changing rooms and how this did actually increase. I have it in the end of gender. I can't think off the top of my head the statistic, but it did actually increase the sexual assaults.
But that's not trans women.
She totally fucked up there too. She should have said, I am a doctor.
Yeah.
Like, come on. Why? You're not dealing with a good faith actor here, Deborah.
No.
Don't say I'm not a medical doctor. Say, I am a doctor.
Right.
Are you a doctor? Thank you for asking. I am a doctor, actually.
Well, later in this conversation, we find out that Vaush is either fucking lying or doesn't understand anything about how research is funded or done.
No,
because
of course not.
He doesn't understand, or pretends like he doesn't understand, that if someone at a college says, hey, I want to study, whether either trans women or men pretending to be trans women is increasing sexual assault in women's spaces.
Yeah, you're not going to get any funding for that.
Yes. That person's in trouble with their research. Let alone they wouldn't even be able to secure funds for that research unless they posit from the beginning that they're going to try to debunk the claim.
This is just a weird thing, because it's just every argument he has is just a dipshit argument, a total dipshit argument.
Well, that's not weird. That's standard for him.